Well, there we are.
I can't explain that one.
A really spectacular introduction to UK Column News today. So it's definitely us, UK Column News, no cheap imitations. Well, hello, it's Wednesday the 9th of March 2016 already. The time seems to be passing incredibly quickly. Just after 1 o'clock, and I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're going to be joined by Alex Thompson from Eastern Approaches. He'll be speaking from the heart of deepest Holland. Before we get there, just a brief comment on the weather. We have a tempest in Plymouth. That's the best way to describe it. So some extremely high winds, gales, gloomy, raining, much as we like it. Apparently Norfolk, they're building an ark, so we assume that there's quite a bit of rain at the moment in Norfolk. And I've been told by Alex that in fact Holland already has an ark built by a local man in Dordrecht. But that ark is not going to Norfolk, it's going to Brazil. So presumably a bit of flooding in Brazil, Mike. We'll leave the weather there, on to more serious things, which is shelf stacking.
Indeed, 0 hours contracts. So this is latest statistics out from the Office for National Statistics on 0 hours contracts. There are now over 800,000 of those in existence, and it looks like that's a rise of 104,000 over the last lot, and it looks like it's mainly 16 to 24-year-olds suffering from this. And the other interesting thing about this is that it looks like some people are taking more than one at a time. Well, obviously, if you're not getting any work out of them, then it's always good to have more than one, but nonetheless, looks like multiple 0 hours contracts per person at the moment. So this situation not improving and demonstrating the state of Britain's economy. Don't worry, George Osborne is going to sort all this out in the budget in a couple of weeks' time.
Or not. Perhaps we should just bring in Alex and say, Alex, what's the situation with young people in Holland? I certainly know of some families where they're adults, but children of those families have found it very difficult to get jobs.
Yes, Brian, we do have a situation like that. And the Netherlands, in employment law terms, is basically like France. It's a closed shop. You have collective labour bargaining enforced by law. So the whole of your profession or trade labours bargains with the government. So if the economy takes a nosedive, you're all in the same sinking vessel and nobody can come up with better terms, basically. So people had been used to the idea of permanent contracts and jobs for life. And in fact, it's still illegal here to have a rotating 1 year or 6 month contract more than twice. You're up or out onto a permanent contract. So the effect of that is people are on 0 hours, huge numbers. Lots of people are temps. And we have a lot of, as in Britain, these spurious requirements that people have to speak some weird minority language in order to drive the wages down.
Okay, Alex, thank you for that. Just one more question, if I may. I know that a particularly big aluminium smelting complex closed in the south of Holland some years ago, but is Holland also seeing the shutting down of major industry?
Definitely it is, and I think that Dutch industrialists were among the first, way back in the 1950s, to realise that their old way of doing things might be under threat in the age of mega industrial blocks in the world competing with each other. So it's been companies like Philips and Royal Dutch Shell that, through Bilderberg and other such mechanisms, have actually pushed for the European Union to be a bloc, basically, and to drive wages down and to get rid of specialisms and export them. So the Dutch do some particularly niche things like at Philips very well and compete with Siemens and the rest of them. But no, the large concerns are going, and huge numbers of Dutch are turning self-employed as well.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Well, we'll be coming back to subject to what's happening in Holland, but freedom of information is the big topic, Mike.
Yes, of course. So within the last couple of weeks, the government decided not to proceed with making any changes to the Freedom of Information Act. But one of the changes that had been under review was the possibility of charging for answers from Freedom of Information. And I just, as a bit of amusement, wanted to highlight this story here from TechDirt about how ridiculous it is to charge for these or at least the ridiculous ends that you can be brought to when you start charging for Freedom of Information requests. So this is the Defense Department telling Muckrock that it will need to come up with $660 million in order to cover Freedom of Information Act fees. This was, they're comparing this with other equally ridiculous similar scenarios where City of Ferguson, as they say here, charging $135 per hour for Freedom of Information Act response work. City of McKinney, $79,000 for 9,000 hours, and so it goes on. $180,000 in Florida to turn over records on a single questionable suicide, and a whole range of these highlighted in the article. So I think perhaps we've had a lucky escape that the government felt they couldn't proceed with this nonsense.
Do you think, Mike, that was because it would have become obvious that we had a dictatorship running, so we're going to close down free information? They couldn't risk closing it down, basically.
I think, once again, there was a significant enough backlash that they couldn't proceed with it at this point, but I would imagine that's still under review.
Yeah. Well, EU referendum's got to be the hot topic.
Well, this is the Constitution Unit, and they are going to be holding a series of seminars on the constitutional consequences for Britain and Europe of Britain leaving the European Union. So the first one, for example, is on the 21st of April. It's called Brexit, Its Consequences for Whitehall and Westminster. This seminar will consider, they say, the implications for Whitehall and Westminster, both of Brexit itself and of the process of negotiating Brexit. How would Whitehall manage the negotiating process, and what would be the role of Westminster? How would the UK's new relationship with the EU be managed post-Brexit? Would Brexit require a reconfiguration within Whitehall or Westminster? It's interesting, the Constitution Unit continues to push out constitutional commentary and so on, but they never actually make any effort to educate people on what the Constitution of this country is, what the history of the Constitution of this country is, and how the EU legislation has affected that. And so really, it remains to be seen what these seminars will do, but I don't imagine they're going to be talking about rolling back the legislation that's been brought in since the original unconstitutional referendum that brought us into the EEC. Yeah.
Well, it's all hide, isn't it? Hide, deceive, obfuscate. I'll just say, if I may, with that slide, if we could bring it back on. When I looked at that image, the first thing that came into my mind was the opening shot of Dad's Army.
Yeah.
So everybody is retreated into Britain as the, we'll call them the horrible hordes in this case, are taking over Europe. But that's what I got, Dad's Army. Whether that was done deliberately or not, I don't know. Bit of nudging.
I think Alex wants to say something there.
Please do, Alex.
Just a quick intervention, Brian. I have here a 1900s or so book called Outlines of Constitutional Law with Notes on Legal History by D.L. Chalmers and Cyril Asquith. And this is why there's no money in telling people what the Constitution is. You write the book, and in a static common law jurisdiction, that is it, with the exception of new case law precedent. There is a heck of a lot of money in telling people what the Constitution should be, because that's a carousel that goes on forever, isn't it?
Yeah. Indeed.
It's that simple. Well, I know the Constitution and issues to do with the Constitution are going to become more and more important, and we're certainly going to look at the aspects of that in more detail. But some of the evidence as to what's going on is just right in front of our eyes. We don't see it. But of course, if we get the opportunity to look back in time, things start to become very clear. So I'd like to thank a lady called Joan Martin, who some considerable time ago gave us a great deal of information, including many press cuttings. Now, as time has gone on, these press cuttings have become more powerful in the message. So let's have a look at this one. We're not going back too far here. We're going back to 2003 and 6. And we've got the Telegraph warning, Germans want British Army to be run by the European Union. Full steam ahead, Brussels draws up plan for EU Navy. So we've got people writing extremely well-informed articles, warning that there's to be a takeover. Well, we can now jump forward to the present day. We've got the EU-controlled maritime force, which was put together supposedly to control pirates around Somalia. These pirates, Mike, they're so ruthless that it requires modern Western navies to be sent against them. Terribly, terribly frightening people.
Yeah.
Of course, the piracy bit is nonsense. What it was to do with was getting an EU-controlled maritime force. We can have a look at this one because this is the latest one we've got, which is NATO ships being contracted to European Union control in order to go into the Aegean, supposedly to arrest all those nasty immigrants. And it becomes more blatant, of course, here where we've got a French general who's simply been put directly in charge of British Army and British troops. But what's interesting about this latest Telegraph article is you notice that in 2003-06, the Telegraph was reporting in a serious way of the dangers of the EU taking over the British Army. When it actually starts to happen, then the Telegraph gives the psychological nudge that it's all a joke, really. It's nothing to worry about. But of course, it's been other people who've spoken out. So we've got Sir Nicholas Winterton, MP, Conservative MP, in 2007, warning after the Lisbon Treaty, but this was a discreet, he means hidden, but giant step towards a federal government of Europe. And let's bring in this, which was kindly sent to me by a lady. She said, have you seen this article where the Royal Navy is boasting that its latest Astute-class submarine has, sorry, I was trying to think of the name, Artful it is. The weapons system and the command and control system has been completed early, so an all-British system has actually worked. Well, surely this article is a lie, Mike, because according to David Cameron, we can't produce any military equipment unless we're working with the French. And of course, the other thing it brings into question here is if the Astute class are working, then somebody's telling a lie that drones can now see our Trident nuclear submarines. That was the scam brought in to help get rid of another chunk of the British Navy. Let's just remind ourselves that if we go back to 1905, we were building a whole battleship in a little over a year. And I'm going to suggest that this is why David Cameron is scared witless, that of course if the nation was led properly, we would be standing on our own without any trouble at all. Alex, a comment from you, please.
Yes, bean counting is at the heart of this. I think you've got people in the MOD whose job is simply to count reports of what foreign powers allegedly can do, and it's the ratchet of expectation again. It's in their interests to massage every report so that it appears that foreign powers can see everything that we've got, because that will allow us then to, or allow them to plead for more new projects when the current ones are perfectly doable. As for how long it took us to build Dreadnought, well, that's a whole geopolitical issue around that, isn't there? And were we put up to building Dreadnoughts in order to provoke the Germans into a response by the Lord Milner Group, who started the First World War with 20 years lead-in time? But it is an important point that the US as well, when they were suddenly, well, the people at large didn't know Pearl Harbor was coming, the government did. When they suddenly were attacked, they turned the whole of the west coast of the US into a massive battleship factory, and to the surprise of the Royal Navy, who thought that they would never have it in them, they were knocking them out at the rate of, I think, was it a complete battleship every couple of months? Something staggering. So it can be done if there's a national will.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, some people may be asking why we're so focusing on the EU army and the rise of the EU army. But of course, if you have an EU army, then you've got to fund an EU army, and without an EU treasury, you can't fund an EU army. So what we're really looking at is the beginnings, the first stages of the complete federalisation of Europe. And so, we've been focusing on the British aspect of this, and particularly the British relationship with the French, and the fact that Cameron has brought us into these contracts, these deals with the French without any real public oversight. He's just announced them once they've been done, and without any discussion in Parliament. Well, it seems it's not just Britain, because here we've got a document from early 2013, January 2013, and discussing the deepening German-Netherlands defence cooperation for Europe's security needs, of course. And they're saying in this context, the crucial question is how bilateral and regional initiatives for defence cooperation can be steered in such a way that they contribute effectively to better collective European capabilities. Have a read through this document, get a hold of it and have a read through it. It's very interesting. They're talking about, well, the conclusions are quite interesting. Based on the analysis of the prospects and potential for deepening German-Dutch defence cooperation, the following 7 recommendations can be made. Clusters like the German-Netherlands defence cooperation should be fully exploited, answering the double challenge of maintaining and modernising capabilities with declining defence budgets. And there's the excuse, of course. Clusters are drivers and instruments for deepening defence cooperations. You need to read the document to understand the word clusters. I believe Merit in the chat box has been talking about this issue for a number of years now. Efforts should be undertaken to define collective capability needs more clearly as NATO and EU at NATO and EU levels, and so it goes on. Now, to bring it up to date, then we have this from last month. Germany and the Netherlands step up their military cooperation, and this is saying that Germany will become joint user of the largest and newest. So Germany will become the joint user of the largest and newest ship in the Royal Netherlands Navy. So there you have it. The logistical ship, it's a logistical ship, admittedly, but nonetheless, they are then going on to talk about armoured cooperation. So against the background of 2 Leopard, 2 A6 battle tanks on the helicopter deck, and so on, joint air defence pioneering role. And the point that's made in this and other articles is that 2 of the 3 Dutch army brigades are now under German command.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this integration across the EU, not just between Britain and France. Alex, have you any thoughts on this?
Yes, the Dutch are very, very slow indeed to wake up to this, but they were in 1939, 1940 as well, when they were repeatedly told Germany's not a threat and there's no need to modernise your equipment. Without getting too chauvinist about it, we have a cluster, you've mentioned the word cluster there, the cluster that interests me is the cluster of civilian female defence ministers with no idea how armies and navies work. In the Netherlands and in Germany and indeed in the Scandinavian countries, all getting together at NATO summits and having jolly selfies together. That's where this has come from. The late lamented Harry Beckoff, who lived to over 100, of course, frequently covered by Brian, has repeatedly drawn attention to the fact that these Dutch units, the best assets in the Dutch army, were put under German command and have to swear allegiance to a German flag. We've shown that image on the show when I've been on before. We have a lad in my church who is, I think, armoured infantry junior officer, and he goes off twice a year to Bavaria and seems to think nothing of it, that he gets shouted at by German officers doing his training and then deployed to Jordan under German command to protect fighter plane bases. It's quite an astonishing situation. And as for the Dutch Navy, well, Brian could talk more about that, but I mean, even I as a civilian have seen down in Flushing the launch of a new frigate by the Admiral of the Fleet. And I have to say that the ratings were very impressive as they marched onto the ship, and the command, this will be familiar to Brian, less so. In fact, the Admiral of the Fleet gave a speech about the new warship that was being launched, and I found myself whispering in my wife's ear about the wrong expressions he was making in Dutch. So people are being over-promoted to the top ranks, and I think quite hastily are being given these flag ranks. And I think navies are the worst to suffer that way, because they're the most personnel dependent of any of the services. And if you haven't got the brains at the top and the patriotism, then never mind if you've got a glorious history like the Dutch, who beat the Royal Navy many times, you're toast.
Alex, there's some really fascinating points there, which we haven't got enough time in today's news to go into, but I will just say that back in 1987, when I was actually on an exchange job in Holland at the Naval Training School in Den Helder, aside from some British officers, there were also German naval officers coming through for training, and what was going on was joint training, swapping of expertise, but the national identity at that stage was still very clear. So although everybody got on well, the national identities were adhered to. There was suitable rivalry. There were suitable jokes. And what we've seen is that this massive and very subtle attack on the national identity is now obviously working, that you have a young Dutchman, as you've just said, happy to go off and be controlled under German command. The significance is really enormous. And I think I am slightly astonished if young Dutch men and women don't understand what's happening. But there we go. It leads us nicely to the European control of our nuclear infrastructure, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Alex, this is for you.
Well, yes, I was just going to say this has been in the French business paper this week, Les Echos, where you often get more dollops of truth than you do in the general French press, let alone the British press. Perhaps they have to wait for a knock on the door and the terrorist team to raid them now if they carry on like this, so that Turkey's already gone that far. But here they are asking 8 key questions about the controversial project of the British EPR, which is apparently a standard acronym now in the nuclear industry, and means European pressure reactors. So it's an EU standard or something for pressurized water reactors, what we used to call PWRs, that the French specialize in. And have you got the text there for the part of the article that was particularly interesting, Mike, or otherwise?
No, sorry, Alex, no.
That's all right. I shall read it out. It was question number 1, which was raised and answered in this 8 questions and answers by the French business paper. Let's see if I can just find out here. Yes. So question number 1 is, what's in it for Électricité de France, which is now a private company? That is to buy Hinkley Point or to operate it. And the answer is, when EDF bought British Energy in 2009, it was with the objective in mind of building new reactors to replace part of the British fleet. 15 reactors were to be operated by EDF Energy in Britain. The planned construction of 2 EPR, European Pressurised Water reactors, on the Hinkley Point site, that's in Somerset, is intended to tide EDF over until the renewal of EDF's nuclear fleet in France. EDF then plans to build 2 copies of Sizewell. So in that first paragraph there, what's in it for the French? Quite a lot. It goes on, this British project, that's from the French point of view, project in Britain for them, also now allows a new business model for the nuclear industry to be tested. The European Commission has approved a financing arrangement that guarantees EDF the electricity sales price for 35 years. This is the principle of, quote, contracting for the difference. Whatever the level of the electricity market price, the price is guaranteed for EDF. This is a model that's already at work to develop solar and wind power. Well, it would be, wouldn't it, because they're not economical otherwise. And which EDF would like to see applied to its investments to extend the operating life of the French fleet, meaning of nuclear power stations. For EDF, the contract with Britain also secures a Franco-British pro-nuclear axis, which is rare in Europe. Finally, EDF is betting on increased cooperation with its Chinese partner CGN, which is to provide a third of the Hinkley Point funding. According to one subject expert, quote, there have been 3 or 4 sticking points under discussion there, that's in China, for a fortnight, and now no more than 1 or 2 remain. This refers particularly to the issues around intellectual property rights to the Hualong, a Chinese reactor type that EDF is preparing to certify at Bradwell, one of the energy facilities in Britain owned by EDF. I don't know what to say about that, really. It's pretty obvious if you followed that. We are basically the raw material for a failed French conglomerate that's gone private with no funds to recoup its losses. And if you look at the partners who are in EDF, Areva, AREVA, is still majority owned by the French state, and that's the electricity generator. And if you listen to Gordon Bowden's material, they are in a very bad way since Anne Lauvergeon was in there until 2011. Bowden has some hair-raising things to say about Anne Lauvergeon's time there. I think we're being wrung dry, really. We're the mugs, so that EDF can regenerate French nuclear power.
Alex, I'm watching the clock. We've got some really good subjects to talk about. Just one point from me here. I think the other thing that's going on, of course, is that you are giving the French, you're opening the door to French control over nuclear matters. I believe that the French are also to be given control over the nuclear deterrence side via this mean. They will become the nuclear experts, and that will include nuclear weapons. And the other thing pointed out quite rightly in the chat room is that Gordon Brown was busy signing off these contracts while his brother Andrew was working for EDF. So no doubt there was a bit of good nepotism going on.
But of course, it isn't all smooth sailing for EDF because their finance director resigned recently.
Yes, the French press has been in a flurry about this because, with typical Gallic shrugging and openness, he said, "I'm out of here. This is a white elephant of a scheme." And so he's realised that at operational level, perhaps the British are not the ones being shafted. Perhaps it is the holders of the bad debts that used to belong to the French state, now privatised and spun off as EDF. Perhaps they are the ones that are being saddled because they're being told, well, that you can tide yourselves over till we have a new generation of pressurised water reactors in France by tinkering with the British obsolete ones. And of course, they don't have the nuclear engineers now to do it for themselves, the British. So I think there's a disconnect here between the political and the financial level within the French nuclear system as well.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, you've got some interesting things, I think, to tell us about a recent political meeting, which you've said is something you don't see happening in UK.
Absolutely, it isn't. This is the coverage of the last Saturday's youth meeting of the small Dutch political party SGP, or SGP to give it the English acronym. And you can see there that an elderly Christian missionary is being given an orange scarf, which is the sign of the national prize that this party awards to its heroes. And the whole day was really quite an astonishing thing that you'd never see in Britain. So I'm going to go through a couple of notes here about what I saw, because I was listening at home with my wife. I have been to that event in the past. And the point here is not particularly that it was a party of those Christian convictions necessarily, but that a small party that gets 2% of the vote managed to pull off something like this. Now just imagine that while I'm talking here, that this is a British political party with 2% of the vote and 2% of the MPs. And that the youth meeting, which is what this was, is for 17 to 20-year-olds. Right, so first of all, their theme for the day is a question which you can't even ask in British politics, which is, who is the boss? Secondly, their morning keynote speaker was the foreign minister, who turned up for a good long Q&A, which was not planned in advance, what the questions were, and he was grilled by these teenagers about Dutch foreign policy, which immediately made me think, well, when was the last time a Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs turned up to a British youth meeting or any political meeting? Since Lord Carrington, at least, what they do is they spend their time delivering pre-digested speeches, the check against delivery stuff, the minister will say, and they deliver them to tame NGOs and to establishment journalists, so they haven't got any time for this. But Koenders, the Dutch foreign minister, turned up, and the 17 to 20-year-olds pressed him very hard on freedom in China, persecution of religious believers, but also economic issues in China. Was China aggressive? And he gave a balanced response and said, well, we're doing what we can, but he was urged not to cede too much Dutch sovereignty. And then, remarkably enough, Koenders turned up to this, although he actually was brought up in the strict church background that these voters represent and turned away from it. But there's no bitterness on his part. He recognises that they're part of the voting spectrum, although they're only 2%, they're never going to win an election. But he bothers to turn up and give them the time of day. And then during the Q&A, he was asked what life was like as foreign minister. And he said, well, I get ferried around every day by private jet and helicopter. But, when I come home, Mrs. Koenders tells me my job within these four walls is to polish everyone's shoes. Are you getting a sense yet of how different this is from Britain? I'll go on. Then there was a China Act in which a young Chinese-Dutch gentleman introduced the main characters of Chinese history, the types, the scholar, the warrior, the noblewoman. And then he said, we're going to do a Chinese greeting. And he got everyone to stand up, including the politicians in the room, and do this Chinese greeting, shaking their hand with the other palm on top. And he said, well, we're now learning some basics about a major country in the world, and now you can actually get someone with the Chinese. And then, as I mentioned already, the Orange Prize was given to this very elderly missionary who used to smuggle Bibles through the whole of the Iron Curtain countries, Brother Andrew. And then he beamed and told them all that one person can change the world and that they should never give up. Then the afternoon key speaker was none other than Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, who was the last Secretary General of NATO. And he spoke frankly to the young people about his amazement when President Bush in 2008 told him the US really, really wants Georgia and Ukraine to join NATO, and they must be given a NATO membership action plan. This was in the Bucharest summit of 2008. And he actually quoted himself in English saying, Mr. President, this will not happen. And I got the sense he was talking genuinely. I don't think he was making this up. Then during the Q&A, he was asked about the major threats to the world, and he said, don't forget that nuclear weapons haven't gone away. I don't think a British luminary would ever say that. He said, religion's a key factor in political decision-making everywhere but Europe, and we Europeans would be fools not to reckon with it. We need to learn the basics of how a Muslim and a Confucian and a Hindu thinks and what they're afraid of. He said Cameron, Obama and Putin haven't nearly as much freedom of action as people might imagine. He said Mr. Erdogan has an enormous ego, and that after the Russian jet was downed on the Syrian border, he knew, and this is the former Secretary General of NATO, I'm sure he's telling the truth, he knew that Turkey was told, look, you can't just invoke Article 4, political support, or Article 5, mutual military support against Russia, you need to cool it. And then they had an afternoon debate between the party's number 2, who is a self-made businessman, that's rare enough in Britain in politics, and a journalist about what's going on in The Hague. And then finally they had their votes. I think you have pictures of those. Are you showing those on screen?
Yeah, so we got a picture of the vote going on there. So they've got red and yellow cards.
Yes, so that this is the for and against. It's instead of a show of hands, they show the 2 colours at once. But look at the enthusiasm involved. And then finally, they had the chairman of the most aggressive secular humanist party in the country, the utterly other end of the spectrum from them, a party called D66. Their chairman came across a chap called Alexander Pechtold, and he is open about wanting to shatter the Dutch constitution and remake it. And he was just politely invited to defend himself and to explain things like, so why do you think you were not wrong about unfettered migration? And why do you still think that the EU membership is such a joy? And when he was being grilled, one young man took the microphone and said, I'd like to ask Mr. Naive there, at which point the chairman, who was a young man himself, said, friend, in this party we address people respectfully by name, thank you very much. And Mr. Pechtold took all this in good humour, despite the fact that a flying column of the young people of this party had actually gone to him a couple of years previously and presented him with a prize for being the country's worst politician. And then to top it all off, the venue, which you can see there with these very young teenagers listening attentively, the venue was changed at 48 hours' notice because of the discovery of asbestos in the cinema in Utrecht where they wanted to hold it. And they managed to put that together in 48 hours with a new venue in another city.
A remarkable coincidence that asbestos should crop up, but it is good to hear that there is still some proper debate going on in Holland and that young people are motivated enough to be challenging politicians. So we'll thank you for that. Well, we're going to move on to the subject of child abuse, which of course is at the heart of the British government. I'm just recapping here that we spoke about this report in the Nottingham Post yesterday, where this particular gentleman, Mr. Loggins, had been appearing in court on some very serious sex charges. And our point was, of course, that he'd been involved with Beechwood, which is exactly where the whistleblower Melanie Shaw started her story. We also pointed out that he was not just a social worker, he'd been working for some considerable time with what was the Catholic Children's Services. It's now Family Faith Foundation, I think it's called. So here he is on their own material. But this is the point we'd like to make. We've noticed that there doesn't appear to be any mention of Operation Daybreak, which was the very Nottinghamshire police into the child abuse around Beechwood. Is it just the UK column? Are we missing something? Have we missed the report? Or is there a reason why the Nottinghamshire police seem to be remarkably shy about talking about Operation Daybreak? We need some help on this, so we're simply reporting there's something strange going on and we'd like our viewers and listeners to give us some help. Meanwhile, we've got a different cover-up. Am I allowed to use that phrase, Mike?
I think so.
Okay, well, here she is.
Yes, indeed. So this is Justice Goddard, who is holding what they're describing as, well, what are they describing it as? A preliminary hearing on Janner today. This is in Court 73 at the Royal Courts of Justice. All of Justice Goddard's hearings will be in Court 73 of the Royal Courts of Justice. Now, this is for submissions from counsel, so it's unlikely that, at least most people believe that there won't be too many survivors there. But nonetheless, they're talking about Janner today. And then they're going to hold on the 16th of March, they're going to hold the preliminary investigation into Anglican church abuse. And then on also on the 16th of March, Cambridge House. Knollview and Rochdale on the afternoon of that day. And then on the 24th of March, they're going to be looking at Lambeth Council. Unsurprisingly for many, perhaps, in the preliminary for Janner, the Telegraph here pointing out that Kenneth Clark has been alleged to have failed to act over Janner and Cyril Smith. And this is Nigel McNamara talking, who is a leading figure, according to the Telegraph, with the survivors organisation White Flowers. And he has said, in 1992, I co-founded Survivors UK, a helpline for survivors of male rape and sexual abuse. We've received a series of calls from young men alleging that they had been sexually abused while they were children in care by Greville Janner and Cyril Smith. In 1992-93, I wrote on behalf of Survivors UK to the Home Secretary, Kenneth Clark, informing of multiple allegations of sexual assault on children by Greville Janner and Cyril Smith. And, well, we can all imagine what happened at that point. But of course, not to worry, because anybody that is suspected of such or alleged to have committed such offences needs more protection, and that's according to Lord Blair. And he's supported by former Army boss Lord Bramall, according to the BBC here. Of course, Lord Bramall was investigated for allegations of being part of a VIP paedophile ring. His case was dropped. But Lord Blair saying that there's a danger that people who are accused but not charged, we've got to be careful that their reputations aren't tarnished. He says, whether you're a public or private figure, to have all your friends and family know you've been accused of this crime, you've always got the no smoke without fire argument. So that's his position on this.
It's remarkable, isn't it, Mike, that while that position is being put forward, we've got local authorities, I believe, including Nottingham City Council and County Council, who think that an appropriate payment to somebody who's had their complete life destroyed through abuse whilst in the childcare system, an appropriate payment is somewhere between £10,000 and a few £10,000. So you are abused while you're extremely vulnerable as a child under the so-called care of local authorities. What do? They buy, buy you off with a pathetic payment. And most importantly, by buying you off, they keep the whole process out of court so that nobody is properly convicted and sentenced of the crime.
It's a difficult situation. Of course, everybody is entitled to be consider themselves innocent until proven guilty. But if you keep people's identity secret in these situations, if, for example, Jimmy Savile's identity had been kept secret in this situation, then, of course, we wouldn't have had the numbers of people coming forward to reinforce the allegation in the first place. So unless there's some publicity around it, it's very difficult for people who have potentially suffered under these circumstances to have the confidence to come forward and speak to the police.
Well, that's true, Mike. And the other thing, of course, is the government was never worried about people being named as potential criminals. So they're accused of something. The government didn't bother at all if it was the ordinary man or woman in the street. The only time that this issue's come up is when we've got big names appearing. Now suddenly we've got to be careful we don't tarnish their reputation. Well, if it's abuse of children in one area, then it's deaths in the NHS in another. And the Telegraph here reporting on Jeremy Hunt, who is said that doctors are going to be able to own up to honest mistakes. Now, these are not the reports that are coming into the UK column, because we have people talking about the deliberate euthanizing of elderly in particular, but vulnerable people in the NHS, the falsification of hospital records, the duplication of records, the hiding of those records, serious criminal activity. But according to Jeremy Hunt, they are going to deliver a safer NHS by unshackling ourselves from a quick fix blame culture. Same idea, Mike, I think. We can't blame people. This is really bad. There are only mistakes, and mistakes are a normal part of life. So they're going to bring in an interventions branch which will probe errors. Same language, probing. What does that mean? Does it mean a proper investigation? No, it means just seeing what's going on. So he wants to bring in an independent healthcare safety investigation branch. which would presumably be like the Independent Police Complaints Commission, which of course is there to cover up and make sure nothing actually happens. So it seems they're getting squeamish about the number of deaths inside the NHS. But of course, the other thing Jeremy Hunt is doing at the moment is stirring up massive trouble with the doctors, to the extent that we've got a whole series of strikes taking place and planned. And we just like to point out to people that, of course, Jeremy Hunt will be celebrating this, because he's caused enough chaos to nearly bring in the final collapse of the NHS. And of course, that collapse is in fact privatisation. So I think he's doing a great job, and I think probably David Cameron is going to give this man he's going to give him a medal. Well, contrast what's happening today. Remember, we're under a Conservative government with this, an incredible article back in September 2004 by none other than Boris Johnson. Lethal hospitals are no laughing matter. And what this man, the hypocrisy, Mike, is just breathtaking. He said Blair should be cleaning up the hospitals, not passing ridiculous laws that will tear communities apart. And if anything, send more people to hospital. He was talking about growing violence on the streets, is what he was hinting at there. Here's David Cameron in recent years, and what's he said in his speech? I love our NHS. I think it's a fantastic institution, a great organisation. It says a great deal about our country and who we are. Well, I think it says a great deal about who Mr. Cameron is, because clearly he's a duplicitous political liar. And that's why he's selling the NHS to foreign corporations. I'll just add this comment, which Boris Johnson also said. He said, isn't it remarkable that we've now got politicians who are distant from the electorate by security measures? Is it the same Theresa May and the Conservative Party that's building a Stasi, Mike, or have I got that one wrong?
It is quite incredible that last night, I don't know what channel it was, but they were showing an episode of Yes Minister, from the first series, I believe, and they were talking about the Big Brother state. It's always worthwhile going back and looking at stuff from that time, and comparing it to where we are at the moment. And
seeing how accurate it is, basically. Yeah. Well, we'll just bring up this one as well. We're on the same theme, really, but we've got Lord Bew, I think that's pronounced, Chairman of the Committee of Standards on Public Life. Well, he's getting his underwear in a twist, because he says, well, the system's not really working and MPs are policing themselves. So in the Telegraph article, quite rightly, the Telegraph flagged up Malcolm Rifkin and Jack Straw as both men that have been involved in very, very dubious activities. But of course, Rifkin was cleared by the very watchdog that he set up. So we've got Westminster brimming with liars, cheats, criminals and perverts, but there's no crime committed, of course, and there's certainly not any misconduct in public office. We'll just remind people that only yesterday you said, Mike, well, they're busy trying to get rid of misconduct as fast as possible.
As fast as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's only a coincidence, though, apparently. Well, Alex, please comment if you like on that. But of course, we're also going to move into your book slot here. Democracy, the God that failed. Well, we certainly don't live in a democracy, I don't think.
We don't at all, but if we could just go back a moment to show this on screen while I remember it. You talked in the chat room, well, not you, but people in the chat room have been talking about problems with smart meters being fitted against their will. Surprise, surprise, it's all in lockstep again, and the Dutch corporation that has got the contract, I don't know how it's been debated, to fit all the smart meters across our region, wrote to us and said, we're fitting a smart meter on date X. And I know this is not a common law jurisdiction in the Netherlands, but I decided to take the common law approach and to write back to them saying, I don't have a contract with you. The contracts require offer, consideration and acceptance. I do not accept your offer. No smart meter. And there may be others who've been hassled, but surprise, surprise, I get this letter back with their official letterhead saying exactly the wording that I had put to them. Although it's a template letter, it's not specific to me. It says, Dear Sir or Madam, you have told us that you do not wish to avail yourself of our offer to replace your current electricity meter with a smart meter. So there you are, even on the continents where they don't have contract law in the sense that we do, if you talk about do not accept your offer, it sometimes does some good. Now, on to the book then. This is Hans Hermann Hoppe, Democracy, the God That Failed. The point about this is, as well as being favourite reading matter of David Scott, I'm sure he'll go on about it on Friday if you ask him, it's often an outsider who tells us what's best and worst about our own system. In the 18th century, you had Montesquieu asking out loud, why do the British have the best constitution? In the 19th century, you had Alexis de Tocqueville asking, why are the Americans such a successful nation? And now in the 20th century, you've had Hoppe asking what's gone wrong with his adopted Anglo-Saxon democracy. And he's decided that the real reason is democracy has been made a god and a be-all and end-all. And it's worth a careful read because he points out that democracy is sometimes in conflict with liberty. And when that's been the case, liberty has always got to win out in proper constitutions, because democracy then has just degenerated, where it conflicts with liberty, democracy has just degenerated into the tyranny of the majority, and from thence you get a tyranny of the corporations who manipulate public opinion. And now to illustrate that, the Scottish Review's Jerry Hassan has just brought out, do subscribe to the Scottish Review newsletters, they're fantastic stuff, even if you're not interested in Scottish material. He's got a point here about what politicians are turning the system into. And if you read that, what politicians are for, the point he makes is that the Conservative Party in Scotland is now so small it can meet in a single side room at Murrayfield Rugby Stadium. And nationally, the Conservative Party across the UK is going to drain all its members, and it's going to continue as business as usual because it's already funded largely by invisible corporations. So democracy is not our god. Liberty is our highest secular political ideal. Not a long book, as you can see. It's nice, easy sections. Do get to grips with it because it's a very pro-family, pro-liberty book that gives us a compass to steer towards in the truth movement. And I would like to mention that our book recommendations are now purchasable through the UK Column shop. And you can see there in reverse chronological order all the books I've mentioned. Go particularly for Dave Barnaby's book there at the top right about the corporatist EU racket, the purple background book. That is an excellent piece of research, and the rest of the ones that I've plugged. Sometimes you'll be able to find a free PDF of books that you can buy here for cash, but they're not always very good PDFs.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Alex. I'll just mention, of course, if you do organise to buy those books through the shop, it does take you to Amazon. If you're going to buy them from Amazon anyway, and you want to support us, then please do it through the shop. That's all I have to say on that.
Okay, and I'll just add that the book by Mr. Barnby is excellent. We've also done a very good interview with him, which we're looking to get out in the next couple of days. Taken a bit of time, unfortunately, but he's talking in his own words about the treason, the lies, the duplicity that was used to lever us into the EEC under Prime Minister Edward Heath, and of course the same tactics being used today under David Cameron. Now, before we leave you, I'm going to say I think I'm reasonably well educated and I understand English reasonably well, but I've got a piece of paper in front of me that actually I don't understand a word of it because there's no English on this piece of paper at all. I can't even tell you what most of the languages are.
It does have the English crown at the top.
It's got the crown at the top here. The significance of this piece of paper is that it was received in a bundle of documents for jury service. So we're idly wondering that if you don't speak proper English, how you're capable of sitting in judgment of another human being. But of course, under David Cameron's Tory government, common sense and straightforward logic is unnecessary. So there we are. This is justice in UK. Come into the court even though you don't understand English. Better in there, I think, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much for joining us. I hope the weather improves in Holland. You'll be able to go off your cup of coffee now. Thank you everybody else who's joined us today. If you're not already a subscriber of the UK Column, perhaps you consider doing that or making a donation. We can only do what we do with your help and support. And as we've indicated a couple of times in recent days, we would like to expand what we're doing. That means new equipment for the studio, and we're going to need your help to help raise some of that money to enable us to do more than just have 2 or 3 people in front of the camera. So more on that in due course. Thanks for joining us. Back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.